Hello and welcome to another episode of Graco Garage. In today's episode, I want to discuss some of the how-tos and best practices around maintaining your non-wash down heated hose to get the best lifespan and performance possible. In today's hoses, we have a localized either addition of insulation or removal of insulation. We can get hot and cold spots in the hose that create hot and cold spots of the adhesive, which can lead to increased char and reduced hose performance. So it's real critical that we maintain uniform insulation throughout the hose to get the best lifespan and performance possible out of the hose. So when we do things like add zip ties to secure that hose, or in the case of over here, we've got a cuff around to protect against abrasion. In the case of the zip ties, we are removing insulation and creating a cold spot on the inside of the hose and a hot spot on the outside of the hose because that heat can transfer through the hose faster. There's less insulation there. In the case of the hose cuff, we're creating a hot spot under that location because we're adding more insulation and it takes longer and it takes more time for that heat to escape. So the cold spots are going to create increased viscosity in the adhesive in that local spot, and then as it moves past and heats back up, it can develop char. Just like in the case of the abrasion cuff, if we have an abrasion cuff, it will protect the outside of the hose from abrasion, but it creates a hot spot on the inside of the hose, which over time can lead to a char buildup in the hose and a reduced lifespan from your hose. So Graco's hose straps were designed this way with the buckle intentionally so that as you pass the strap through the buckle, it acts like a guide holding everything kind of in the same spot, and then you can wrap that Velcro down and create a nice secure strap, but not cinching down on the hose to where you're going to create a cold spot or a hot spot and reduce that performance of the hose. To explain my point further, let's go to the thermal camera. So as we take a look at the hose under the thermal camera, we can see these local spots of really bright color. That's a local high temperature zone on the surface of the hose, which means heat is escaping more rapidly through that part of the hose. So here we see 170 degrees right in that notch where the zip tie is, but the rest of the hose is down around 135 degrees. But right in that valley of the zip tie, and over here as well, we can see we're in that up to 180, 190 degrees right by this zip tie. That's letting a lot more heat out by those zip ties, meaning the core of the hose underneath is cooler than this insulated part. Then if we go over here to the Graco strap, we can see a fairly uniform temperature all across this portion of the hose. And then if we move the Graco strap, it's all a relatively uniform temperature. We might have a few degree increase underneath the Graco hose strap. Now if we relax that and we take a look at the abrasion cuff, the surface of the abrasion cuff is only about 100 degrees, but if I cut that zip tie and pull that cuff out of the way, now we're up to 230 degrees underneath the cuff, and that's creating an absolute hot spot on the core of the hose, lead to increased char underneath that relative hot spot. So as we're taking a look at this wet hose, we can see that the moisture has been soaked into the insulation on the hose, and it creates a stark temperature contrast between the hot hose and the wet hose. Now this moisture being in the insulation underneath that plastic wrap, it's going to boil on the inside of the hose core and then travel out to that plastic wrapper and condense and then re-soak into the insulation, creating a continuous cold spot on this section of the hose. Now that cold spot is going to create a cold spot in the adhesive as well, which is going to reduce the material viscosity consistency. So we do want to be careful that we keep the Graco heated hoses nice and dry and away from any sources of moisture. As always, great job today, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Graco Garage.